All right, welcome back. And we have probably 2 more videos to go, and then we'll have completed 10 Steps to Learning Chess Tactics by Dr. Dave Regis with his kind permission. And these next 2 videos will be a little different. So rather than full games, actually, I think there's one full game somewhere, but rather than full games, I'm going to set up some positions from games that Dr. Davis suggested are his favorite combinations from chess history. So I'll set the positions up. You can have a little bit of a go if you want to, and we'll have the computer put the analysis on for us just to prove that these combinations really were as incredible as Dr. Dave says. Some of them are relatively easy to spot. Some of them are unbelievably complicated and much more difficult. So a bit of a mixture. Okay, so I'm going to take a first pause while I set up a board. Okay, so this position with white to move is from a world championship match, no less. It's Petrosian against Spassky, 1966, Moscow. So actually this position came up in a world championship match, a 24-game match, and this was one of the games. If you want to hit pause and work out what Petrosian plays in this position that wins the game, or wins significant material, so we'll win the game at Grandmaster level, press pause. Otherwise, I will show you in 3, 2, and 1. And this one is probably the easiest of the ones in this chapter, which is why I've done it first. Actually, I've changed the order a little bit. And the remarkable move is queen to h8 check. Don't need the computer to help me with this one. So it's check. Obviously, the king can't do anything other than take the queen. But now knight takes rook is check. And when the king moves, knight takes queen. And suddenly you'll see that that Petrosian is a excuse me, is a knight and a pawn up. Really, really, really nice position. So queen to h8, a decoy because it drags the king across. Knight takes rook check, knight takes queen, and white is just a piece and a passed pawn up. Okay, very, very nice. Right, let me pause and I'll reset another second position. All right, so this one is from 1916, and it's the future world champion Alexander Alekhine against Felt Tamopol 1916. And the position at a glance looks pretty even. Both sides have 4 minor pieces, 2 rooks, queen, 7 pawns. Both sides have castles, but there's a lot more to it. And you can see that because the computer has got +5 on the eval bar. So there's a way that Alekhine as white can win quite a significant amount of material here. As is going to be the idea in this chapter. Hit pause if you want to have a go. This one's quite tricky to find, to say the least. Actually, it's very tricky to find. But otherwise, I will carry on and show you in 3, 2, and 1. And now the correct move is knight to f7. But I'm going to put the computer on this time because there's quite a lot of possibilities. So knight to f7. Now, the immediate point here is that you're threatening to take the queen. So something has to happen. What you'll notice is that the computer is not suggesting king takes. Well, let's see why. If king takes, you have a problem. And it's the stunning move. Well, knight g5 works, but the stunning way to do it is queen takes e6. And if you play king takes queen, you actually run into this move, which is checkmate, because of the bishop going that way and the knight guarding that way. If you don't take the queen and you play king to f8, well, knight g5, and you're threatening various things. You're threatening checkmate, and really there's the only thing you can do to delay is black. I mean, look, it's +19. You can see white's just winning. You can only do anything about it with just ruinous amounts of material sacrifices, so you lose. So we cannot, again. So we cannot play king takes queen. So king takes knight is out the question. So what else can you do? Well, the best move, says the computer, is to play queen to c8, just get the queen out of the attack. But we still now have queen takes e6. We've lined up the queen against the king. So what's the best possibility here for black? Well, the best possibility is going to be knight to e5. But we're now going to walk into some unpleasantness. Knight to h6 is double check. Okay. King to h8. And what can we do? Queen takes knight is pretty good. What's after pawn takes knight, for example? What's going to happen here? Well, bishop takes f5, and you're just happy here as white, aren't you? I mean, you're, what, 2 pawns up. The enemy king is in trouble. There's a pinned knight. You've got an attack on the queen. Just ouch. So that's a rather lovely move from Alexander Ayakim. Knight to f7, completely impossible looking move, just putting the knight in danger. But the nicest bit about it is undoubtedly this checkmate possibility here, with the bishop guarding these two and the knight guarding here. Fantastic stuff. Okay, let's pause and set up the next one. Okay, so this time we are in 1912 and we have Levitsky against Frank Marshall. Frank Marshall, very famous American player from the early 1900s, late 1800s. Probably, had it not been for Lasker, Capablanca and Alekhine, he probably would have had a fair old shot at the World Championship, but he was perhaps just one notch below those three. But here he plays a remarkable finish to a game. And you can see the eval bar is saying -4, so obviously up 4.5 now. So obviously black is winning here, but how is black winning? Because on the face of it, everything looks defended. There's no white pieces hanging. The king is safe. What can you do? I mean, there's a check with the knight, but the king looks like it's just going to move to the corner. And what's the knight going to do afterwards? So, okay, this is a tough one to spot. Actually, it's a puzzle in 2 stages, in a sense. Let's see, if you want to pause, see if you can work it out from this position, then feel free. But otherwise, I will show you the first move in 3, 2, and 1. And so the first move is rook takes bishop. And I don't want to give too much away, but suffice to say you can't safely play pawn takes rook. Well, actually, okay, whatever. If you play pawn takes rook here, knight here is simply check and wins the queen. Okay, so pawn takes rook isn't a possibility. What happened in the actual game after this was white played rook c5 and attacked the queen. This is the position where Frank Marshall played a move that it is said that the spectators watching the game threw money at the board, threw coins and gold and what have you at the board, because the next move is so incredible. Press pause, have a go. If you find this one, you're a bit of a genius. Well done you. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on in 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to put the move on the board, then I'll turn on the lines to prove it. How about that? Queen to g3. The queen could be taken in 3 different ways, 2 of them by pawns. Let's have a look. Pawn takes queen, checkmate on the spot. Okay, well, that's not going to do it. Pawn takes queen. Checkmate pretty much on the spot. So the queen is completely safe from both the pawns. The only move you can go that, as the computer's saying, isn't checkmate in a forced number of moves is queen takes queen. And this leads to a situation where black is -5 and better by forced moves. So knight e2 check. King must go to h1. Knight takes g3 check. Now bear in mind the pawn can't capture because it's pinned. And if you capture with this pawn, you get checkmated again. So the only thing you can do is put the king back. The knight returns to e2. And now it's simply a mop-up position. Black is a whole piece up and simply plays rook to c. Let's just get the king out of the check first, being silly. Rook to c3. And having seen all the fireworks, well, we're now a piece ahead. And in fact, unless white swaps off the rooks and makes the position even more clearly winning for black, If white doesn't do that, let's say white plays here, well, then another pawn's probably going, or you can play a6 and then this is going. It's just horrible. But yeah, what a move that is. Putting your queen in danger from 3 different pieces, including 2 pawns. Stunning, stunning stuff from Frank Marshall. Okay, let's pause and then I'll get the next position up. Okay, so we are in Moscow, 1914, big tournament, and we've got Osip Bernstein against Jose Capablanca. And Jose Capablanca is probably, although he's not the world champion in 1914, he's arguably already the best player in the world. Maybe Lasker would have something to say about that. But Capablanca, an absolute legend of the game. And in this position, it's white to move. And I have to say, if white plays the right move, you can see from the eval bar, it's pretty level, minus 0.4, tiny advantage to black. Okay. But there's a trap set here because there's only 2 black pieces defending this c3 pawn, but there's 1, 2, 3 white pieces attacking it. And Bernstein sees this, tries to calculate, and thinks he can take the pawn. So let's see what happens. Knight takes pawn was played in the game. Knight takes knight. Rook takes. Still okay at the minute, so says the computer. Rook takes. Rook takes. And there goes the eval bar. What on earth has the eval bar just spotted that suddenly makes this position minus 5.5? What was the move that Bernstein did not see in this position for black, but Capablanca absolutely did? Hit pause if you want to try to work it out. Otherwise, I will carry on in 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Queen to b2. What is going on here? Well, the first thing is it's threatening the queen, it's threatening the rook. So what happens if you just play queen takes queen? Well, you get checkmated on the spot, back rank mate. So that's not going to be very helpful. If you just move the queen out of the way of the attack in a careless way, you can get possibly checkmated via this route in a couple of moves time along the back rank. Or white can just take, black can just take the rook, but why do that when you can checkmate? The point is the rook is hanging. So what if you play something like rook to c2? Well, that's not going to do it either. It's minus 11. Why is it minus 11? Well, actually, let's put the computer on just to make sure I don't misspeak. But queen to b1 is check. You're going to have to put the queen in the way, and suddenly queen takes rook. You've lost a piece. There is literally nothing you can do after queen to b2. There's nothing you can do that's any good. Everything is minus 6, even though it looks like you've just hanged your own queen. In fact, it's going past minus 6. Computer's actually suggesting you do your best bet as white is just to sacrifice the rook. Look, let it go. A queen d3 now. So yeah, just a hopeless, hopeless position. But who, apart from a chess genius, would even think to put the queen on b2, where it can immediately be taken? And remember, Capablanca must have seen all this before he set up the initial trap position. He has to have seen 5 or 6 moves ahead in his head that he could play this queen b2 move. Because if he didn't see it, then all he's doing is going towards a position where he's a pawn down. So incredible. So takes, 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 and then stunning. Queen b2. Wow. Okay, let's get paused and on to our next one. Okay, so this one, we're back with Alexander Alekhine, and the year is 1922, and we're in London. Alekhine against Yates. And on the face of it, if you didn't look at the eval bar, you might think the position looks a little bit dangerous. But if rook takes, surely rook takes knight and black's just a piece up, aren't they? Well, maybe. Of course, that isn't necessarily the case because, as you can see, it's mate in 7. So if you want to have a go at working out all the complications, that is why it is checkmate in 7, feel free. But it's a tricky one. So what I'll do is I'll give you the first move and say, yeah, it is rook takes g7 first, even though the rook can take on f6. If you want to work out the correct next move for white that simply wins material and therefore wins the game and is mate in not very long, mate in 6, feel free. See if you can work out what it is. Otherwise, I'll carry on in 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to put the lines on the board. The move played by Ali Hakim is king to e5. You can play rook h7, by the way, and it's just one move slower because you play king e5 next. But king e5, what can you possibly do? For example, if you put the rook back, the king's attacking it, you get mated like this. Oh dear. Well, that's no good. If you try to defend the rook, you get mated in exactly the same way. Ah, well, that's not very pretty. What else are you supposed to do with the rook then? Because if you just leave it there, what are you going to do? There's just nothing. There's no sensible moves. There's literally no sensible moves. But what if you leave it there? What if you just play a random move? Let's just say bishop here. Well, check, forced, check, forced, king takes f6, and there's now nothing you can do to prevent the ladder mate. And in every possible variation, you get exactly the same thing. So in this position after rook takes, there's not even anything you can do to stop the mate, because if you don't take the knight, well then this move next is just checkmate anyway, because the knight guards that square and that square. Just crazy stuff. So nothing at all you can do. Yeah, ouch. But the key point is you're not actually losing a piece by playing rook takes g7. You're still checkmating in no time at all after this move. Mate in 5. Wow, nice. Okay, let's get the next position. Okay, so this position with black to move is from 1907, and we have Rotlevi against Rubinstein, Akiba Rubinstein, another of those players who was top level in the early 1900s. I don't think he ever got a world championship match, unfortunately, but he was absolutely a competitor for it. And this particular game in Dr. Dave's book, there's an awful lot of analysis and lines given for this. And I don't want to do everything necessarily. So after you've had a go at trying to work it out, which this is a tough ask to work this one out, but I will put the lines on the board. We'll use on the screen. We'll use the computer a little bit. So if you want to have a go at thinking what you might do here, feel free to pause. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on in 3, 2, and 1. And the move that Rubinstein played that makes the position -9 is a rook sacrifice. Rook takes knight. Now, it's not just that it's a rook sacrifice, remember, it's a queen sack. Because look, okay, Rotlevi was attacking the queen. So let's just see what happens after pawn takes queen. There's lots of other things that can happen, and I'm going to leave the moves there so that it can be seen up to a point. But pawn takes queen. Let's follow the main line. Now what? Well, the point here is that these two bishops are extremely dangerous pointing at the king. And so Rubinstein's next move, it's mate in 8, remember, is rook to d2. What? Yeah, rook to d2. Okay, well, let's see what happens if you play queen takes rook. Bishop takes e4 is check. The queen blocks. And now rook h3. The best that you can do, according to the computer, is to, say, play bishop to d4, but that just means that the bishop takes. What else are you going to do to kill time? Rook takes. And the point is, the ultimate threat here is that rook takes h2 is coming. We'll just play any old move, whatever. Let's just play a move. The point is rook h2 is going to be mate because it's check. It's supported by the knight. And the queen can't take because the queen is pinned and this bishop guards here. So if you go back a few moves, after rook h3, it still applies here. Look, rook takes pawn is check, supported by the knight. The queen can't capture because she's pinned, and this bishop guards the escape square. So absolutely devastating. So you can't, after rook d2, play queen takes d2. What can you try otherwise? Well, we'll look at the line that is the longest route to checkmate, and then we'll call it a day at that, say, otherwise we'll be here for some time. But rook takes is the best bet, apparently. So now bishop takes. This is check. The only good move, so it says, is to play queen takes. Fine. But now knight takes f2 is check, and king to g2 or king to g1. In either case, we'll put it on g2 because that just happens to be the move. But knight takes e4 is now check from the rook. It's a discovered check. King must go back. It can't go forwards because this rook had this line guarded. Rook f2 check. The king can go either direction. Let's just go king to g1 because why not? Now knight to d2, and we're threatening here and here. So the bishop can take the rook if it feels like it, but knight to f3. The only legal move is king here, and now rook here is mate because it's check. The knight supports the rook, and the knight guards that square. And by the way, even if it didn't, so does the bishop. I mean, there's so many variations here, but absolutely incredible. As Dr. Dave calls it, Rubinstein's immortal game with just the ridiculous move in this position where instead of getting your threatened queen out of the way, rook takes c3. And yeah, wow, what a game of chess. Okay, we have nearly finished. Let's pause. Okay, so this one isn't a game as such. It's what's called a composition. So a strong chess player, in this case called Rink, has created this position as a series of moves, as a sort of mini puzzle. And what on earth is going on here? It's white to play and win. So if you want to have a go at working this out, feel free, but it's pretty remarkable stuff. So press pause, otherwise I'm carrying on in 3, 2, and 1. So the first move is Rook A8. Actually, I'll put the lines on because it's probably helpful. Now, how on earth does this work? So let's have a look at all the possibilities. The rook is attacking the queen, yeah? So the queen can't go here because of the bishop. The queen can't go here because you'd play rook to a6 check and you'd win the queen. The queen can't go here because you'd play bishop here, skewering. So I said check, it's not check, but it would skewer the queen. You can't go here because rook to c8 would be check and you'd pick up the queen next move. Obviously not there because of the pawn. And so that means that the only square you can possibly go to in this, oh, sorry, there is one more. If you go to this square, what happens then is bishop to g6 attacking the queen. And if the queen takes the bishop, then rook a6 is check and skewers the queen. So, okay, so the only move you can really play here ought to be queen to a2. In fact, the computer says your best bet is just to accept that you're going to lose the ending and just play queen takes rook. So just to show you, so queen takes rook, but now bishop here, check, king must move somewhere. I don't suppose it makes a lot of difference where. And white will win that endgame because they're a bishop up. If they've got good technique, they'll win the endgame. Okay. But let's say that black plays queen to a2. So the only square where you don't just lose the queen. Well, now rook takes a4. And the queen has got problems again. So obviously these squares are no good. None of those are any good. That's no good. That one's no good for the same reason, the bishop move. That's no good because of the rook move still. You can't go there because of the bishop. And if you go all the way back to, well, that's the only place to go, actually, as it turns out. If you play queen takes rook, then bishop to here is check, and you'll pick up the queen next move and be winning. So you got to go back to g8. And then it shouldn't be too hard to work out that the correct next move is to go back again. So now there's absolutely nowhere for the black queen to go, except really to take the rook, which we know won't work. So if queen takes rook, bishop to f3 check, and you pick up the queen next move. So let's say that you try queen to h7 instead. Well, now we checkmate the queen. Bishop to g6, queen is attacked. These two squares are no good because of the rook. So you're really a bit stuck. And if you play queen takes bishop, as we say, check, king must move, rook takes queen, and white's winning. So isn't that a remarkable little position? It looks as though for all money, white is absolutely dead. It's rook and bishop against a queen and pawn. The queen and pawn would normally win. And yet, after rook to a8, it's actually white that ends up with the winning endgame. Stunning stuff. Okay. we just need one new board now, because we have one thing left to do in this video, and it's a complete game that Dr. Dave has given us. It says Internet Blitz game. So Ilya Muchnik against Lev Aronian, an internet chess tournament from 2004. I'm simply going to play all the moves all the way through to the final position where Muchnik makes a series of tactical moves. So straight through. E4, E5. Don't need the lines for the minute. Knight F3, Knight C6, D4, ED4, Knight D4, Bishop C5, Bishop E3, Bishop B6, Knight to C3, D6, Queen D2, Knight G to E7, castles queenside, castles kingside, Knight takes pawn, pawn takes knight, Bishop E2. You can see the eval bar is not really moving. This is all perfectly reasonable stuff at the minute. F4, King to H8, G4, Knight to G8, H4. Here come the white pawns towards the enemy king. Knight to F6, G5, Knight to G4, Bishop takes bishop, Rook takes bishop, Rook D to G1, H5 from black, en passant now, so takes here, which removes the H pawn, Knight takes, F5, Queen F6, Rook G5, Bishop D7, Rook H to G1, Rook F to B8, B3, Rook back to G8, Rook H5, King H7. And this is the diagram position in the book that Dr. Dave gives. And as you can see, if I just go back and move, it's already saying +1. So a bit better for white. But after King H7, it becomes +3. So if you want to pause and have a go at seeing what you would do in this position, please do. +3.5 now, it's going up. Otherwise, I will carry on in 3, 2, and +5 now, by the way, 1, and here we go. So putting the lines on the board, the move that was played by Muchnik is E5. And it's a clearance sacrifice. We want the pawn out of the way because it opens up lines for other white pieces. So E5. It attacks the queen. Queen's got to do something. The best of a bad bunch of moves, as you can see, is to play queen takes pawn. So that's what happened. And F6, another clearance sacrifice. So these two pawns are now, the two pawns that were here are now out the way. So we now have an open diagonal, a clearance sacrifice to make space. After F6, there's not really a whole lot that can be, can be done. In the game, Aronian played queen takes F6, which is the second choice computer move. So queen takes F6. Bishop to D3 check. Now you can't just block with the pawn because that's mate on the spot. So you've got to do something else. You may as well play king to H8, which is what happened in the game. And now the absolutely stunning finishing move, rook to G6. Yeah, just incredible. If you play pawn takes rook, you get mated. Takes, takes, and takes, and the queen is guarding both squares and attacking the king. I mean, that's stunning stuff. If you do something else, what's the best? The best move is probably to play queen takes rook, is it? Yeah, so queen takes rook, it's +19 at this point. But after bishop takes, well, you still can't play pawn takes bishop for the same reason. You get it mated. And what on earth else are you going to do? Because this remains a horrible threat. The best the computer can come up with is just getting the rook out of the way. Look, rook to F8. But no good. Rook takes. Again, you can't play pawn takes here because queen here, king there, queen there is mate. So after rook takes, you've got to just move your king out the way, and bishop H7, king H8, bishop F5 check. You still can't at any point play pawn takes rook, bishop takes D7. And even now, if you try pawn takes rook, after queen takes pawn. You're just being crushed. You've still got the attack against your king. It's difficult to see much that you can do against the threat of bishop here, queen here. Yeah, and it's just mated, not very many moves. So a remarkably pretty finish to that game between Muchnik and Levon Aronian. Okay, that is it for this video. So that is some of Dr. Dave Regis's favorite combinations. There is one video to go where I'm going to set up 12 different puzzles, test positions for you guys to have a go. They won't be as hard as some of the ones that we've just seen, but it'll be interesting to see how you get on. Thanks for watching. Hope that was really enjoyable, and see you next time.